About the Russian army's shell famine in Ukraine and how it is turning into a shell crisis. In the fourth quarter of 2023, for the first time, the number of rounds fired by Ukrainian artillery exceeded the number of rounds fired by the artillery of the occupying forces. This was an expected result due to the decreasing firepower of the Russian army due to the depletion of ammunition depots. While at the very beginning of the invasion of Ukraine, in February and March, the Russian artillery could afford even 80,000 rounds per day, as of the beginning of October 2023 the figure has fallen below 10,000 rounds for the first time. This situation forces Russia to distribute its firepower very rigidly, limiting most of the front. And when someone claims that there is no shell famine, that right now there is hell under Avdiivka, there is nothing surprising about it. Under Avdiivka hell, and for hundreds of kilometers of the front there are solitary, or batch, shelling. This decrease is due not only to the reduction in stocks in warehouses and storage centers, but also to a number of other factors. The Russian military-industrial complex is able to provide troops on average for 4.5 thousand shots per day. It was not possible to increase critical production in Russia, which is confirmed by the lack of technical and technological capabilities. It is for this reason that the Russians are trying to find additional sources of ammunition, in particular Iran and North Korea. But as is known, Iran has been transferring shells to Russia for a long time. Nevertheless, this has not been able to critically affect the situation in the war zone, and the number of rounds fired by the occupiers has continued to decline. Similarly, North Korea will not be able to critically change the situation in the combat zone with its supplies. Only ad hoc, short-term and on certain parts of the front. At the same time, Ukraine's partners are just increasing production of ammunition. If the war drags on, the Russian army will find itself in a situation where it will not be able to fire more rounds per day than its own production capacity allows it to do. This is one example of the fact that a protracted war is not in Russia's interests in the first place. Russia also has a serious shortage of artillery, as the amount of artillery being destroyed exceeds the capacity of the Russian defense industry to make up for those losses. Beginning in May 2023, the gap between losses and the ability to compensate has become significant. In turn, the reduction in the number of artillery also reduces the enemy's firepower, and the use of older artillery reduces its effectiveness in terms of range and accuracy. The problem of barrels is no less important, since in the absence of mass, serial production of barrels for artillery in Russia, the only solution is either to reduce the number of rounds fired to a safe level or total cannibalism of barrels. Of course, Russia can try to get some artillery from Iran and North Korea, in addition to shells, but just as with shells, this will help only locally, but will not solve the problem. As a result, the Russian troops are no longer just suffering from shell starvation, but rather have a shell crisis, unlike the Ukrainian defense forces. Of course, in the coming days, we may even see peak spikes in shelling from the Russian side. But this will no longer be a systematic shelling of ammunition, but convulsions of Russian capabilities.